It's the NFL draft week, and we're going to play a game of fact or fiction regarding what the New York Giants may or may not end up doing. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network, si.com/NFL/Giants. And a special welcome on in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here at the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Also, click the little bell for notifications on new videos, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot coming this week. And don't forget to like this video. All of that helps tremendously, because I am trying to catch up with the Dallas Cowboy podcast, the Locked On Cowboys podcast. It just irks me that they're beating me. So whatever we could do to make it happen would be appreciated. And before I jump into today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast, just a quick thank you to everybody who sent me birthday wishes. They are much appreciated. And yes, I had a very nice weekend for my birthday. So thank y'all who took the time to send me wishes, whether it be on X/Twitter, Instagram, or whatever. It's all appreciated. All right. On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to play fact or fiction. So I have 3 scenarios, and these are actually scenarios that are kind of tough. I don't know necessarily if you could say one or the other. I mean, there are pros and cons to each. So we'll explore each of them and kind of come to a conclusion as best as we can as to whether or not the statement is true or if it's just, fiction. So that's our agenda today. Let's get it started. All right. Item number 1 on our list. The Giants will trade out of the number 6 position. Now, you'll notice for this statement, I didn't say that they would trade up. I didn't say that they would trade down, just that they would move out of number 6. So obviously, we've got to look at both scenarios, don't we? All right, so let's take a look at trading up. Okay, so obviously, if you trade up, you're going to have to give up assets. All right, there's no two ways about it. So what are the assets? Well, it depends on how far up the Giants try to go. So, if we're talking moving up to number 3, which I don't think, by the way, the Patriots are going to move. I mean, I'd be surprised if they do. You're talking, I think it's like a 300-point swing, if I'm not mistaken. So that would almost certainly involve the Giants not only exchanging first-round picks, but they may have to give up a second-rounder to move up to get a guy. So now, if you move up to number 3, now you're waiting till what? They go on the clock again, and I think they next go on the clock. If you give up the second round pick, I think they next go on the clock at number 70. That's a long stretch. I don't think that Joe Shane will want to go that long. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't if I were a GM. So, so what about, does it make sense to trade up to number 4, which is held by the Cardinals, or number 5 held by the Chargers? I still think it's going to take the same, close to the same amount of assets. I mean, if you're trading up to 3, you're probably going to have to throw in another pick to move up. And, depending on where Joe Shane would want to pull from, there's no rule that says if he trades up, he's got to take picks from this year's class and exclusively package those up to move up. All right. So obviously would have to swap places in the first round, but if the other team was agreeable, could he throw in an extra, 4th round pick next year or a 2nd round pick next year? Sure. There's no rule that says he can't do that. And right now, I believe the Giants are projected, I want to say, to have 8 picks next year. They could get a ninth one, if the comp pick for Xavier McKinney comes through. So the Giants will have a few more assets next year if they want to dip into that pool to maybe package something up. So the problem is if you're the Cardinals, a team that's kind of rebuilding still, do you really want to wait till next year to be able to use those picks, or do you want picks now? That's where, it might get a little sticky, and where maybe the negotiations won't, come to fruition if the Giants try to trade up. The other thing I'll mention is Joe Shane really seems to like the idea that he has premium picks in the top 100. Now, obviously, they traded one away in the Brian Burns deal, but the Giants right now still have 3 picks in the top 100. I would be very surprised if he would want to give up any of those picks to move up. I mean, people will say, well, what if the quarterback, he wants falls down the board to say number 4? Would he consider trading up to maybe beat the Vikings or the Broncos from trading up? Maybe. I mean, I'm not going to say no, but this is a deep quarterbacks class, folks. And I gotta think that the Giants, if they like talent in this quarterbacks class, that there's more than one guy that they like, that there's more than one guy that maybe Brian Dable feels that he can work with and turn into, a viable option. I don't think it's, this guy or nobody, or Drake May, for example. I don't think it's we got to get Drake May, and if we don't get Drake May, then we're not going to take anybody. I'd be surprised if that were the scenario. But that being said, you could make the case, do they like, say, for example, Drake May better than Bo Nix, to where, they would prefer to have him? Well, sometimes you might prefer to have something and you might have to settle. I don't recommend settling in this case with the draft, obviously, but when you don't have a lot of assets and you have a lot of needs, as the Giants do, you got to be a little bit more judicious with what you do in the draft, because you could very easily leave yourself short. And I know the Giants go according to value, to best, what's the best value, best player available, but you got to address need at some point. You've got to marry the two up, and I just think it's a dangerous game. Now let's talk about trading down, which I think might make a little bit more sense here. All right. So I mentioned before, this is a deep receiver class, a deep cornerback class, a deep quarterback class, all needs that the Giants have. So if they were to move down a few spots, they could probably still get a good player at any of those spots. Okay. Which I think makes the most sense. In addition, now they are picking up additional draft assets that if later on in the draft, they want to trade back into the bottom of the first round and get another player, so that they have 2 first-round picks in this class, both of whom, remember now, will have the 5th-year option available to them. That, to me, makes more sense to do. All right, so let's say the Giants say, okay, we'll trade down a little bit and we'll get a quarterback. Maybe they trade down, I don't know, with 11 or 12, and they take their quarterback there. And then they say, okay, now we've got all these assets. Now we're going to see if we can trade back into the bottom of the first round to get our wide receiver. Well, now you just got 2 key position players on offense that you can potentially put on the 5-year plan. And for the quarterback especially, I think that's important to do if you can do that, because especially if you're going to let that kid sit for the year, which is probably what they're going to do. So I think that would be very important to get the quarterback, if you can, in the first round, so that you have that 5th-year option available to use on him. So that being said, fact or fiction, the Giants will move out of 6. I think they will probably stay at 6. I do not think they will move up. I think if I had to assign a percentage, and I hate to assign percentages because it's either a yes or no question, but I would say it's probably a 90% chance that they stay at 6. I think it's a 10% chance they look to move down if they can find a willing trade partner. And Shane, he did say that, he was surprised at the number of teams that had made preliminary calls to see if he would be interested in trading down. He volunteered that information, by the way. Now that could be a smokescreen to entice teams to come up. Don't know if that's indeed what's going on, but something to take into consideration because it sounds like there might be an opportunity for the Giants to move down and still accomplish what they need to accomplish in that first round. All right, coming up next, item number 2 is getting a quarterback the most important thing the Giants have to do in this draft. We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, Giant fans, we've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. Lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly that you love, but it's on your phone, available anytime, and comes with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. And there's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and even charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And again, thank you for joining us. Coming up, we've got a lot of content coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Tomorrow, Ed Valentine is going to be with me, and we're going to have some final thoughts before the draft. I am hoping to get with Tana and Bad Dog for a live stream. With the Knicks playing in the playoffs and the Rangers, I know the two of them like to follow stuff, live. And also, I think the Lakers are in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. So scheduling has been a little tricky. But at some point, I will catch up with those guys. I know you guys like when I do shows with them. So that's coming up. And then all this week, straight through to Sunday, we're going to have shows for you. So I'm going to have bonus shows. Obviously, we'll do recap shows after each night. We'll do preview shows. I mean, it's just going to go straight through to Sunday and then into the new week. So we're going to do a string. We're not going to take a break here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And I hope you will tune in to all of that. All right. So let's get back to our fact or fiction items here. Item number 2, getting a quarterback is the most important thing than anything else the Giants could possibly do in this draft. I don't think you could say that. All right. Now, yes, getting a quarterback is important. I'm not going to deny that. All right. At least as far as I'm concerned. But you've got 6 draft picks. They're all important. They're all picks that you have to hit on if you're Joe Shane, or you've got to hit on at least most of them. Okay. This team has a lot of holes. That's the one thing I think Shane said in his presser that I think we can all agree on that wasn't a smokescreen. So, you've got quarterback you have to fill. You've got receiver 1 that you have to fill. You have safety. You have cornerback 2 that you have to fill, interior defensive line. They're all important positions in their own way, shape, or form. So to sit here and say that quarterback is the most important, I don't think you can say it. Is it important that you can say most important? No, I don't think you can say that. And not because the quarterback is going to sit for probably the first year if he is indeed drafted. I don't think that's why you say that, it's not the most important position. But because, you look at this team objectively, they have some holes on the defensive side that I don't think are getting enough airplay. Everybody's focused on the Giants need a quarterback. The Giants need a receiver two, a receiver one. Not a lot of discussion about, cornerback two, not a lot of discussion about safety or about the interior defensive line, finding a potential, pass rusher type who can also play the run to line up alongside of Dexter Lawrence. There's not a lot of discussion about that. And there really needs to be more. So you also have a new defensive coordinator in Shane Bowen. Does he have what he needs? Or are the Giants going to just turn around and say, oh, we're going to put all our assets into the offense to build up the offense? It's a balancing act. I think, Joe Shane, he's going to want to do obviously both sides of the ball. But as I've said on other shows, I would not be surprised if this Giants draft takes on more of a heavy defensive flavor than it does offense. Not because the offense can't use talent. We mentioned quarterback, we mentioned wide receiver one. I think they can use another offensive tackle to develop. I think they could use, if they can find an athletic tight end to groom, absolutely do that. So, yeah, there are still needs on the other side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball. But in looking at the breakdown, I just think more defense is going to be needed because the defense, while, the better of the two of the units between, offense and defense, still not, where it needs to be. So I think, quarterback is that the most important position than anything else? Fiction. Got to go with fiction there because I don't think it's true. All right. Now, coming up next, the Giants need as many draft picks as possible in this year's draft. This is an interesting one. I'm going to tell you what I think about that statement right after this. Hey, Giant fans, let me tell you all about my fantastic experience with our friends over at GameTime. So, as many of you know, I'm a big Kiss fan, and there was no way that I was going to miss the band's final performances last winter at MSG. But as you can probably imagine, tickets were hard to come by, let alone affordable seats. Well, thanks to GameTime, I not only found the tickets I wanted, I got them for less than I would have had to have paid other sites, including one set that I got on a flash deal. And how cool was it that I got to see what my view of the stage would look like before I made the commitment to buy? These are just a few of the reasons why I trust GameTime when it comes to getting tickets to my favorite concert shows and sporting events. And I'll give you one more reason to trust them: event cancellation protection. Last winter, Kiss's frontman was battling the flu, and there were some doubts about whether those last shows would even go on. But I had nothing to worry about thanks to GameTime's event cancellation protection. You're going to love GameTime, folks. Their prices are so competitive that if you find tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. Hey, Giant fans, the Locked On NFL mock draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and here's an interesting one that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. And the question is Do the Giants need to get as many draft picks as possible? Now, there are two schools of thoughts here. Number one, just how many needs does the team have? All right. So every year you can make an argument that the team has needs, something that they have to fill. All right. Now, we've already mentioned some of the needs that the Giants have: quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, safety, offensive tackle. Could they use maybe interior defensive line? We forgot about that. So, what about dipping into next year's class if you wanted to, let's say they wanted to move up or, move around the board in subsequent rounds? That I could see doing. And here's why. People talk about, oh, you have to have all these draft picks. The more draft picks you have, the better. Folks, I think that's not really true. I think that's kind of a myth, if you will. And here's why I say that. It's not the number of draft picks you have, it's what you do with them. All right. I will refer you back to 2005, the year after the Giants put together that big draft day trade to get Eli Manning. The Giants were left with, I believe, 4 picks in that 2005 draft. And they turned those 4 picks, or 3 of the 4 picks were Corey Webster, cornerback, in round 2, Justin Tuck, defensive end, round 3, Brandon Jacobs, running back, round 4. All 3 of those guys were pretty good players for the Giants. All 3 of those guys contributed to Super Bowl championships. Okay. So, no, the Giants didn't have a lot of picks that year, but they made the most out of what they did have. So, this whole notion of let's just rack up the picks because the more picks we have, the better. The more swings at the plate, the better we're going to be. I think that's a myth. I really do. I think that makes the statement fiction, to be honest with you. Now, obviously, GMs don't hit on every single draft pick. The trick is to minimize your misses. And that is why the Giants are in the situation they are in today. They have had more misses than they have had hits. So, that being said, if Joe Shane and his scouting department have done their homework and their due diligence, and they have, truly collaborated with the coaching staff, you would like to think that regardless of however many picks they do end up with in this class, and again, they're going to start out with 6, that they're going to make as many of them count. Because at the end of the day, folks, it doesn't matter. It's quality over quantity. And that's just how it goes. We've seen it work before. We've seen instances where the Giants have had, 10 or more picks. And how many of them actually worked out? Not a whole lot, in recent years at any rate. So that being said, that's something to keep in mind as we go through this draft starting on Thursday. Do I think the Giants will look to move picks this year? Like I said earlier in the show, I wouldn't, because there are still some needs that they need to look at. Would they look to dip into next year's class where I believe they have 9 or 8 and they're potentially get a 9th one? That I could see. That I can see making sense. So I can't wait, guys. This is it. The mock drafts are going to stop. The speculation, the rumors, the smoke screens. We're finally going to get answers on Thursday. It is coming up so quickly. We will bring you everything you need to know about the Giant draft picks. And of course, once the picks are all in, I will be inviting my Locked On College hosts to come on from the schools from which the picks come from. And we will be talking about what they bring to the table and all that good stuff. I know you guys liked that series last year. We are going to do it again this year on Locked On Giants. All right. That is going to do it for us here on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. Ed Valentine joins me. We're going to talk what Joe Shane had to say. We're going to talk draft and all things Giants, because that's what we do here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you for spending part of your day with me, folks. I will see you tomorrow.